Well, hello, everyone. We hope you had a pleasant Easter meal. If you celebrate that, it was actually my brother's birthday the day before, and we had a better meal doing that. It's relatively late here on the East Coast. It's just after halftime of the national championship game, and what a great distraction for myself before I go to sleep. Let's do a show about some tennis. What do you think, Steve? Are you ready for tennis?
Sounds good. And look, it's going to be a pretty quick one, isn't it? As we just have to roll through four tournaments in the space of probably the next hour or so.
I know, and it's a shame. It's just the two of us. Our third cohort has to deal with a less than healthy child, so wish her good luck. And we do have her picks, so we'll be tapping on her and her selections here as we go through, and that'll be a lot of fun. Where are we going to start this adventure, Steve?
We may as well start in Bogota, shall we? We'll start on the women's side. We'll go ladies first and kick off there.
That's very polite of you. Bogota, of course. We're down in Colombia here. First tournament in South America, first clay tournament in South America in quite some time. Our number one seed here, Sai Zhang. We go down at the bottom. Paolini's down there as the 9th seed. Arena qualified and is someone who's generally pretty good in these tournaments. I mean, overall, although this is a 250, it's fun. You got Towson there. Serrano was in the finals last year. She's the young local player who's going to, I think, continue to get better. How does this shake out in your opinion? These are the top two quarters, of course.
Well, I think the first thing that kind of springs to mind when you look at the draw is the fact that Zhang is that number one seed. You're expecting the draw to maybe not be as strong, but it's actually kind of an interesting little draw here. There's a lot of names who have either performed well here in previous years or, are pretty decent on clay or, decent at altitude. So there's a couple of names that do stand out. I think, from a lot of our chats over the last, couple of months, but also last year as well, Clara Towson is one to keep an eye on basically in most tournaments she plays now. And this looks like a decent spot for her draw-wise. I think Aurora Berena's played well here in the past or, had a 6-love, I think, in qualifying to get through. So she's one to keep an eye out who maybe pops up and plays well this time of year. Outside of that, you can maybe make a case for Martin Kova in that first quarter to make it a little bit of a run. But look, I think it's open and there's a lot of opportunities here with a lot of the big names on the WTA tour hanging out over in Charleston this week. What is standing out for you here?
I think you're right. You picked kind of an interesting section there. That Martin Kova Serrano match I'm expecting to see there should be pretty interesting. I mean, Kung maybe isn't the easiest out in the world there in the first round, where I think Serrano is just going to take care of Vickery unless, she just completely loses it. Just a really bad spot for Vickery here. So I actually expect Serrano to be there coming through. And then it's that match between her and I assume Zhang, who generally doesn't play a lot of clay. She shows up to the Anning tournament in China, or Anning, sorry if I messed that up, tournament in China every year and just beats up on a field of women in the 200 and plus rankings. It's really just kind of a silly tournament if you go back and look at it. But we're here in altitude. That should help her serve a little bit. She's a very competent player and has a successive history in kind of these random little 250s every now and then. I like her draw. You've got Vagele there that made it. I think that she'll be a comfortable favorite there against her. There might even be a price open there already, but I think she moves through there. So that winner of the Zhang Serrano match to me really defines what's happening. I have Zhang picked in my bracket, but I think it's going to be pretty close. I have Zhang picked simply because, like you said, Serrano does have to beat Martin Kova, where Zhang is already kind of in that spot. As you look down to the second quarter, though, the name that sticks out to me is Clara Towson, young player who's on an incredible winning streak on hard courts, and clay is actually where she's had, I think, most of her success as a junior. So you look at her, you look at this draw here, you've got Paolini and Arena who are going to kind of beat each other up a little bit, and they're hardworking players. They're very good. Towson has more talent. She's very young and certainly could run into a veteran. Again, somebody like Paolini, someone like Arena is going to, have that veteran experience, that, almost unquantifiable edge of just kind of knowing what it's like in that spot, where if Towson kind of has a bad day and they're going to pressure her into those situations. If she can't hit winners when she needs to, if she can't not make mistakes, she might lose that match. But again, I'm kind of reaching for straws here a little bit. I think that she is the most talented player probably in this draw and definitely this section. This half of the draw. I mean, when we get down to the bottom, there's some good players down there, but I like her to advance through all this, probably beat Zhang there, maybe Serrano.
I think there's one player there that is unseeded that has an element of intrigue, I think, for me. And I don't know if she does for you or not, but Buzarnescu, if you look at her performances, I mean, you can kind of split her career down the middle as before and after. I think she rolled her ankle in that, I think it was that slippery tournament just before the US Open a couple of years ago. She's never quite been the same, but there's just that potential there, I think, for her on clay and particularly at altitude as well. She's starting to maybe take some steps in the right direction. I'm actually a little surprised that she's almost coin flip, I think, odds against Tan in the first round. She's probably the one in this section that I'd probably be worried if Towson caught her on a good day, that there might be the potential there to be a little bit of an issue there. But again, it's hard to know because having that kind of Buzarnescu form of a couple of years ago in mind, it's almost like I'm kind of sitting there waiting, wondering if will she come back? But it just hasn't quite come yet. Are you expecting her to kind of improve again and move her way back up the rankings, or is this kind of her lot now for the rest of her career?
I kind of lump her in with Rebecca Peterson in this sense where, not that they're old players, they're older players on the tour, and they've had what seems to be a very serious injury and took a long break. And, even if you look back, I mean, she's starting to play some better tennis, beat Fried some, beat Fernandez in Miami in qualifying. That's, all pretty respectable there. But I'm not inclined to be excited or try to bet on someone, again, who's 32 years old, coming off a tough injury. I'll wait and see. Again, maybe kind of in the same way I talked about Arabirena or Paolini, kind of having that veteran knowledge that, knowing how to play on a tournament like this might help her. I think you're right. You can kind of make that case, but I'm not expecting that for a player in the situation. Again, coming off a long injury, being older rather than younger.
Yeah, that seems more than fair. Shall we move on to the bottom half of the draw?
Indeed. Wang Yifan won a tough 3-setter. That was actually a fun match there against Arango, the local wild card. Tormo down there at the bottom, just, again, on a torrid pace and generally very good in some of these events. She's someone that just loves the South American clay tournaments. Some interesting names there in the middle. Roos there is the 3 seed. Zidansek is the 5 seed. She's always dangerous on clay. What sticks out to you here, Steve?
Unfortunately for me, 2 of the players that I really like in this draw would be scheduled to meet in the second round were they both to win, and that's Zidansek and Sharma. I think it was 2 years ago that Sharma was here and made the final. I'm trying to think, maybe I've got my Colombian clay court tournaments mixed up. But
yeah, I'll look that up when you talk.
I think, she is a player that has that serve and level and ability to, use the altitude to her advantage a little bit. I think it's a great spot for her after what's been a pretty poor start to the year for her. She's been putting herself in winning positions and hasn't been able to kind of follow through. Zidansek, I think, is another one who you need to respect on clay. I think that third quarter there, so for those watching along in the top half of the screen, it's the most attackable if you can find the right player. I think that Barra versus Rus match is going to be pretty pivotal in shaping that third quarter. But I think when you look to the bottom, I don't know, Saras Arribas Tormo just keeps kind of proving everyone wrong. But I don't know. She's hit that point now where she's played a hell of a lot of tennis. And I don't know if I really want to be jumping into her here at now what is shorter outright prices for her. And she looks awfully short against Sara Errani. And I never thought I would be considering in 2021 backing Sara Errani, but here we are. I think I saw she's around that 450 or plus 350 mark in their first round match. So it's an interesting section. I am just a little disappointed that the 2 players I like are so close in the draw. Who stands out to you here?
Well, just to kind of touch on what you said there, I like the way you described Tormo kind of, defying expectations. I will actually make my first public apology to her. Well, maybe not an apology, but, my first congratulations to her for having success on hard courts before this season. For the last 2 years, she was a great fade. I refer to her as a trash can because she was just garbage on hard courts, but she's played just about as good at tennis as anybody, especially given her rank and, kind of her level. previously, she'd be the most improved player candidate probably for the year so far. But the narrative has switched. Like you said, now she goes from being an underdog, unexpected, to a position she's had success. Like you said, she's a favorite to win this tournament. She's a huge favorite over Sarah Irani, and there's a good case to be made for that. Irani has been very poor this year, struggled basically outside of qualifying for the Australian Open, but this is a better situation for her. I think she's had a little success in this event, but let's say she beats Irani. Then she has Balsova, who looked very good today in that third set in the match overall against Shmedlova. Like you said, Sharma, and I was able to look it up while you were talking, she made the finals when they last played this event, lost in 3 sets to Anna Samova. Or Zidansek could be there. Then has to play, again, that third quarter is the easiest quarter, like you said. When we get to the value section, we picked a couple names in there, but it's just a really tough draw for Tormo, who again is fatigued. There's certainly not any value in her number, and we'll touch more on that later. But I like this spot for Zidansek, honestly. Sharma, again, made the finals last year, but I think had a little easier draw than she does. I don't think that she's played maybe her best tennis this year, and Zidansek has been pretty solid. I think this is a good spot for her. The altitude will help her. Again, if she can get past Sharma there, maybe Tormo will be there. Maybe she won't. And if she can get through that, again, you kind of want to pick, if it's funny, these markets don't really exist for these smaller tournaments. If you could pick the fourth quarter to win the tournament, that would be a really fun group of players to have, simply because that third quarter is so beatable.
Definitely. That's the thing, is like you throw Zidansek, you throw Sharma, you even throw Bolsova or Sorribes Tormo in that third quarter, and you jump into them pretty quickly.
Yeah. Anything else here to touch on the bottom half? I think we covered just about all of it, and maybe did some nice segues and foreshadowing of what's to come on our picks.
I think we just jump into our picks for this one. So we'll start off with our ace, or our pick for the tournament. So because she'll probably kill me if I do forget, I'm going to lead off with Candice's picks, just because then I can't forget. So Candice's pick, Shane, for this one. My pick. Let's start with yourself. Who's your ace, or who's your pick for the tournament?
My pick for the tournament, Clara Towson. Again, young player, very good. I think that she's had a lot of success and has actually had a little bit of break to recuperate. This surface should be very good for her. Again, the altitude that helps power hitters. It's going to be easier for her to hit the ball, and she has that wonderful combination you want for clay court tennis, where she can move, she has great fitness, she has good reaction, but at the same time has the power to hit through the ball and can serve well. Has a pretty soft spot in the draw. Not the softest spot. I don't love where she is, but I think that she'll be a favorite all the way through.
Yeah, look, and I tend to agree. And I think she caught the attention of a lot of people who perhaps don't watch some of the smaller tournaments. I think it was when she knocked off Jennifer Brady at Roland Garros after Brady made that run at the US Open. She's my pick as well, and I'll probably put a little asterisk next to that I'd be mildly concerned maybe that, if Buzarnescu looks good in that first round, that she could maybe cause a little bit of trouble for her. But I think when you look at the price and you look at the potential matchups along the way, I think she looks to be a great spot there, as top pick for the tournament. Moving to our value picks, and it kind of does tie in that we do have Towson, but Candice did have Buzarnescu as a value pick here, and there is, it is longer odds, and she may be able to get. I think she will be patchy and streaky, and I think it's worth keeping an eye on her. I actually will probably be backing her in some capacity against Tan in this first round, looking at the odds that are currently available.
Yeah, if you turn the clock back, this is a great pick. At this price, if Buzarnescu again is even 80% of what she was, kind of before that injury, it's a tough spot in the draw. But again, there's some value there. As much as Towson is a favorite, it's annoying to pick people near there. At the same time, you kind of have the other edge of it, where that's where the value is. If you think that favorite is beatable. Yeah.
And looking at our value picks, we've kind of gone along similar trains of thought in similar spots of the draw, but I've gone with Astra Sharma. I think her serve is going to be a big help for her here this week in the altitude, particularly a kick serve against some of these players that she's scheduled to come up against. I'll probably be on her in some capacity in her first round match as well. And you've gone for someone else in the same section?
Yeah, it kind of, as we talked about, I just foreshadowed there a little bit. Sarah Sorbis Tormo is a big favorite. We talked about all the reasons: the fatigue, the surface change, the dynamic change, the kind of sneaky tough pass she has to get to the quarterfinal here. I like Zidansek. I would have Zidansek as a solid favorite over Sharma there. I bet on her in the first round. I think that the market's overreacted here a little bit to Kalinskaya's success lately on hard courts. I think the surface change is going to be very tough on her. So I like Zidansek here. Again, I think Sharma made a nice pick. Again, if I could, I'd bet the fourth quarter. If I could, I'd combine Zidansek and Sharma, but we can't do these things.
Yep. We wish we could, but we can't because tennis isn't big enough yet. Someday. Looking to our unforced errors, I've gone with Sorribes Tormo. Again, we did touch on it a bit. She's just played a lot of tennis, I think. And we've got the switch here. And you look at Irani, Bolsova, and probably one of Zidansek and Sharma to get out of the quarter. It just plays a lot more difficult, when you look at her odds compared to some of the other players in this part of the draw. Now, you wouldn't have possibly gone for Sorribes Tormo as your unforced error after your public apology, would you?
No, absolutely. Again, to remind the folks, the unforced error, the idea here is a player that we're trying to avoid, but not necessarily because their price might be poor or there's something wrong with their draw. There's, extenuating circumstances. This may be a good way to put it. And Tormo coming off this long run, I think it's just going to be tough from her, having played all this tennis, traveling here, then having to get used to clay, having to play in the altitude. Now, she's had a ton of success here. She's very good in these events. There's a lot of reasons to think that, she'll succeed. And, it's a player in Charleston that kind of has a similar situation here. And we'll talk about it again, but there's just probably give her a pass this week. She might do very well, but given how much tennis she's played, given how much expectations have been built up, and, we don't have odds right here, but she was, I think, in the 5-1 range. She was either second or third favorite to win this event with a very tough quarter, frankly, and a tough opponent probably waiting for her in the finals. So, a lot of reasons to maybe give her a pass.
Now, I've given her a pass, but I've also said that she's overvalued. I can't have her at the price. Maybe if she was playing another hardcourt tournament and had played maybe slightly less tennis, you could maybe make a case. I just think there's too many quality players in here, which is, again, a weird thing to say with Zheng as the top seed here. I think there's too many good players in her, journey to the final to justify that, $5-ish price. Candice has gone for Yasmin Paolini, who falls in that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, in that section, I think
she is the toughest draw of anybody.
Definitely,
right. She is the hardest draw in the tournament. She beat on. That's obviously not too tough. She'll have Ara Barrena, Towson or Buzarnescu, Serrano or Zhang, and then in the final, hopefully Zidansek, maybe Tormo.
Maybe. Now, who's your overvalued player?
My overvalued player this week, as I start to look through it and hinted at it a little bit, this will actually tie in with my value pick. Aransta Rus here, really perplexed, frankly, and maybe to give you a little inside baseball. I mostly handicap tennis from a data perspective. I try to look at the last couple of years and balance things, and as I do, I'm surprised to see Rus here as I think she was about 20-1 or so. Not necessarily in the favorites, maybe even a little less than that, but favored here over Barr to win this match, and one of the favorites to win a very easy third quarter. We talked about how the third quarter is easy to attack, and part of the reason there's value in it is because I struggle with Rus. Again, she's had success at the ITF level, but that was about 2 years ago. Last year came up, finally started to play some WTA level clay events, and really struggled. Now we've talked about the altitude quite a bit. That'll help her. Has a strong serve, hits the ball very well. That'd be good for her, but I think she's going to struggle in her first match a lot more than the market is giving her credit for. And, if she gets through that, sure, very manageable quarter. Somebody like Wong or Tomova, she should be able to beat. Perez Diaz, I don't know a ton about her. We'll see how she does, but then even still has to beat the fourth quarter winner and whoever's going to be at the top, and she'll be big underdogs to Zidansek, Tormo, even Sharma. That'll probably be a pick'em or something in that range. Well, I would make it that, but maybe the market wouldn't. But there's just a lot of things working against her, and I just don't understand why her number is as short as it is in the first round and in the outright market in general.
Yep. That seems more than fair. And I guess, as we said, on paper, maybe it doesn't look like the strongest draw, but I think it's probably the most fascinating of the four, I think, for this week. It's a great opportunity for all these players, and we'll see why now as we transition over to the next women's tournament in Charleston, why there is great opportunity there in Bogota, because there's a number of big names hanging out in North America on the green clay.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. The green clay, I'm curious, Steve, again, I take more of a data approach, and I frankly lean on a really great group of people to help me understand, some of the more qualitative stuff. Could you maybe take a crack at trying to describe what the green clay in Charleston is like, and what that means versus, what we normally see with clay?
It's not your classic European clay, which is that bit heavier and, turns into a more of a grind. You will see players this week. It's that kind of mix. The best way that I can think of describing it is it's a clay surface that still allows Madison Keys to be half decent. It's like you still need to hit through the ball quite well, but obviously it's less jarring on the joints. It's kind of a bit of a hybrid. We see it in a couple of tournaments a year. I think June last year they played one of those kind of exhibition type tournaments there, which Keys actually I think beat Sophia Kenin in the final. It is that little bit of a hybrid, so it's not that pure kind of heavy bogged down clay that you can see sometimes through Europe, particularly the lower altitude. So it's not, you can't really go off fast hard court form. You can't really go off that pure clay form. It's kind of that hybrid in the middle that you look to players who do have a little bit more versatility and variety, have the power to hit through. But it's just not quite, when you look at it and it says clay, and when you go through, if you try and, filter things out via surface, it's just not going to work as well for you this week.
It's really hard. And again, as someone that attacks us from a data perspective, I look at clay stuff, but at the same time, I try to look at hard court stuff, and it's really hard to filter on slower courts. One of the things that I frankly need to get better is understanding what courts are made out of and how that works, and what is really a slow court and fast court. But it is a little tough this week. So, honestly, I rely on the fact that they do play here every year. And frankly, a lot of the women that are in this tournament, luckily, we can rely on the fact that they played here. So a little bit of tournament-specific stats are good here, I think. So that's just kind of another angle. In general, what do you see here in the draw? We've got Ashley Barty here as we look at the top half. The aforementioned Keys, defending champion from 2019. Vondrousova actually got to move up there to the 9th seed. That used to be Kiki Burton's. Bencic there is the 5 seed. Rybakina, as we start to look, some of these matches have been played. She's there in the middle. Unfortunately, I bet on her to win, and she lost the first set and promptly retired like a jerk. So while I try to get over that, what do you think, Steve?
Look, I think it's an interesting draw, and again, it's it's not the biggest tournament, so we're kind of dropping back off that Miami run that a lot of these players have just been on. When you look through kind of the first little section, Barty does get the first round bye, plays Doi first up. Look, should be. It probably is a surface that does suit her. It's just a matter of whether she's up and backing up from that Miami win as comfortably or with as much motivation as we probably saw from her last week. And might I add, I think we opposed Barty last week in Miami, which looked really good in her first match against Kakova when she was down, was at 5-3 match point. But obviously it was a great resurgence from there. Looking further down, I mean, it probably is a surface that does suit Anisimova. Has she played enough tennis of quality form to be a threat? Probably don't jump into. I'm probably not as keen to jump into her in that top little quadrant. Bencic is going to be up against it with Badosa probably in that first particular match for her in the second round. I do like Vondrousova kind of popping up there and taking the Burton section. I think this is a great opportunity for her when you look at it. Looking through there, Navarro as a big underdog in the first round is someone who intrigues me. But I think, when you look at that and when you look at her recent form on the green clay over the years, if Madison Keys brings a relatively decent level, who is stopping her up until that quarterfinal? It's hard to make a case, I think, for anyone there. So maybe at longer odds, you can maybe make Vondrousova a play here, but it's, there's no one who's I don't think there's a lot that are really jumping out at me strongly. I'd probably go maybe a value pick of Vondrousova just over Madison Keys in this section.
As I look at it here, I mean, Ashley Barty is rightfully the favorite. She's the best player in this draw, in this section. We'll see how she does. Generally skips this event after Indian Wells and Miami, so doesn't have a lot of experience here, but has a very easy little section and quarter here. Now that Rybakina is out, frankly, Bencic is probably the best other player. Maybe Badosa could be competitive, but should kind of she'll be a big favorite kind of all the way through that quarter. You look at the second quarter, why not Madison Keys, defending champion, even won the fun little tournament they had last year here, made the final another time, I think a quarterfinal the year before that. Just love these conditions. And even though she hasn't played well, you go back and look, every other year she comes in basically cold, just like this. So you look again at her quarter, it is a bigger draw, and frankly, it leaves some softer spots. The only name that kind of sticks out to me is Kudermetova. I think these are good conditions for her. I like her draw. Frankly, I was more excited about this when Kiki Bertens was up there versus Vondrousova. I expected Bertens to get knocked out at some point, and that Vondrousova match will be a little more difficult. Vondrousova used to be down there and having to play Keys, but I still think Kudermetova can be pretty competitive. The winner of that Kudermetova-Vondrousova match, though, unfortunately has to play Keys. But if they can get through that, and maybe Barty falters at some point, maybe she's fatigued, is looking to kind of take her by, maybe win a match or two, and then go on to whatever kind of the next thing is. It's kind of an interesting spot in the draw. Again, as I talked about in the last tournament, there's value in opposing the favorite. I think that value lies here in whoever you think comes out of the second quarter.
And I'll touch on it a little bit later as well, but I feel like here, if I had to pick, and looking at the odds that were up, I'd go. I mean, Vondrousova, I think is value. I think she's more value as a win the quarter type spot as opposed to winning the tournament. Whereas I think Keys has the ability that if she can build some momentum, I think if she wins the quarter, she probably wins the tournament. If she finds herself at the pointy end here, I think it means she's playing well, and when she plays well, she is one of those very few players who is very hard to stop in any capacity if she really does get that momentum rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the quarter prices here are actually a better way, frankly, to attack it just from a general value perspective, given how soft some of the other spots are. Let's jump into the bottom half. Muguruza RC there at the top, Kenin at the bottom. We've got Mertens and Kvitova also with buys. How does this shake out for you, Steve?
It's an interesting one. I think, you got a lot of power players, in that third quarter. You got Muguruza and Kvitova, as you said. A player that does stand out there that, maybe can handle the hybrid conditions of this surface relatively well might be a Yulia Putintseva. I think there is, a little bit of appeal there. It's going to come down to, a bit like Barty, is the motivation there? Muguruza said in the past that, part of her, what she needs to develop and improve her game is her consistency week to week, and not just trying to get up for slams, but to be able to kind of find a way in these smaller tournaments as well. Petra Kvitova, I don't know if it's the best surface for her from a movement perspective. Easy draw to the quarterfinals. I think she got Storm Sanders there in the second round, who beat Muhammad earlier. Then you look to the bottom. I mean, I'm trying to stay away from Elise Mertens outright, so I'm going to keep doing that. Coco Gauff, I don't think this is the surface that really suits her a great deal. Sophia Kenin did make the final of that little exhibition here last year and lost to Keys in the final. And I think she beat Alison Risk 6-1, 6-1 along the way. So, she's one to keep an eye on at the bottom there. And, I think she probably should be winning that quarter if we see any kind of semblance to decent form that we've seen from her over the last 18 months. How about you? It's kind of a weird one where you look at it and there's a lot of players that you're like, oh, yeah, look, on potential, they could probably blast their way through here. But, when you know that it is a little bit of a different surface, and it's harder to be as confident, I guess. But is there anyone that stands out for you?
It's really tough. I mean, Muguruza is the best player. She's one of the favorites. It makes perfect sense to me why, obviously. I think she has a really easy draw. Petra Kvitova rarely plays here, and when she does, she loses quickly in the first round and goes right to Stuttgart. I see no reason that she would do that again here. Maybe wins a couple matches just frankly because the draw itself is fairly manageable. But in general, I mean, this just seems like Muguruza's have to lose. Kenin, like you said, she's done well here before, but it's just been really not good so far this year. Mertens maybe puts it together, but at some point she always runs into someone that's a little better. I think she could definitely win this quarter, honestly. But if she runs into Muguruza, that's a 6-3, 6-4 Muguruza win, maybe even 6-3, 6-2 kind of thing. It's a shame that everything was kind of in balance like this. You really want to attack this half, but I picked Muguruza. I think she moves through here, but just tough to attack her.
Yeah, definitely. All right, shall we get to our picks overall for the tournament? We'll start off with, so Candice has gone for Muguruza, so I think you've just given a good reasoning for that, so I'm sure she can thank you for that next time. She won't be mean to you at all. I've gone a little bit rogue here.
He's never mean to me.
Never.
You have gone rogue.
I've gone rogue, and this isn't even the most rogue that I'm going for this episode, so stay tuned for that a little bit later. I've gone for Yulia Putintseva, and it's one of those ones, yes, I know she's right near Muguruza in the draw, and she'd be slated to play her, I think, if she were to beat Diaz in the second round. But I think if she can beat her, and if she can play that counter-punching, frustrating game on this surface, she can then kind of piggyback and take the draw and go and run with it. I think if she's playing well enough to beat Muguruza in these conditions, she's probably playing well enough to beat Kvitova. And I think, she has that kind of game to frustrate, a lot of players. She is that one of, she does play well in that kind of slower hard court. She does play well on clay. There aren't too many negatives there. Basically, the thing that is a mild concern is if she gets blown off the court, which, look, when you're taking those bigger odds, I'm willing to accept. But I think there's some potential there for her, and it's nice to see her outside getting some fresh air after, she clearly didn't enjoy her time down here in Melbourne.
Yeah, like I just said, you're trying to. That's the quarter you want to attack. You want to be in that quarter, in that bottom half, trying to figure out who's going to win. So, you picked a name against someone who I think is going to work real hard and take this tournament seriously, where other players again might be looking forward, like Kvitova might be, to another tournament.
Definitely. Now, who have you gone for?
My pick to win here, as I started to look through the names, I'm going with the defending champion. Madison Keys loves it here. This seems like kind of what she does every year. Struggles a little bit to find a groove, comes to this tournament, plays very well, and unless she runs into someone that is markedly better than her, does very, very well. And even then, has beaten a lot of players here. Very comfortable with these circumstances. As I look at her draw, now that Vondrousova is out of the way to the quarterfinal, she'll have Kudermetova or Vondrousova there. Comfortable match for her. Again, has all the power in the world to hit around those players. Maybe Barty's there in the semifinals. Maybe it's Bencic or somebody else, but I'm happy to pick her to win this. I think that she's in a great chance to do what she's done for the last couple of years and, come in kind of cold and somehow put it together and win this tournament. She loves it here.
Yeah, look, and she was very, very close, I think, to being my pick as well here. And, my value pick does fall in the same section. I just think because there is value here around it is that Vondrousova, I think more so to win the quarter, if you can access that, as opposed to winning the tournament outright. It is going to be difficult, I think, if she were to meet Keys. But I think there's a little bit more perhaps value in her price. I think, the probability of Keys winning this tournament is higher. But when you look at the prices that are on offer, I think, Vondrousova is maybe a slightly, is also an interesting play. I wouldn't be talking anyone out of taking Madison Keys. I think her form obviously was shown, as you said, over the last couple of years on this type of surface. But how about you? Have you got anyone else, from a value perspective here that you're keen to keep an eye on?
Yeah, similar section. If it's not Madison Keys, I like this spot for Veronika Kudermetova. I think that she's here. She's going to be focused to try to win this event. The surface, I think, works nicely to her advantage. Again, I don't love that Vondrousova got moved up there. I thought that'd be Kiki Bertens, which would be a little more winnable match. But, she's not going to get distracted and can upset by whatever Vondrousova is going to do. I think that'll be actually a pretty even match. And then, if Madison Keys isn't completely on fire at that point, might have a winnable match there. And again, I think that first quarter is very soft if, again, Barty isn't just continuing to win every single match she plays for the rest of the year.
Exactly. And looking at the odds of Barty, she's going to be favorite probably in the majority of tournaments that don't have the name Osaka as well, and even then she's probably going to be going relatively close. She is my unforced error just because it is coming off, it's that come down off a big tournament win again, having not played a lot of tennis recently. It's hard to know if she's she doesn't. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. When she steps on court, there are patches where you do worry that maybe she's not entirely switched on, and I think we saw that in the first round or her first match in Miami. She just found a way out of it because of the quality of opponent at the other end of the court. She doesn't have that, like, I'm trying to relate it back to like even like a David Ferrer or someone that or a Nadal, when they step on court that they're going to be going at 100% from start to finish, and they're fully invested in whatever, it could be an exhibition tournament, it could be, a Grand Slam tournament. I'm just not sure that price is great in this type of tournament.
If you think about her attitude in general, right, she basically took last year completely off. She took a couple of years off earlier in her career to go play cricket. So we know that tennis is not necessarily her first love, which, again, kind of lines into what I mentioned earlier. It just, you have to kind of give her a break.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'm not going to be opposing her aggressively in any capacity. I'm probably just going to avoid that section, really, in a lot of parts from an outright perspective, and probably avoid most of the matches that she's involved in. Now,
exactly.
We've come to a dangerous point. We've all got the same overvalued player. And what could possibly go wrong here? Do you want to lead off, or shall I? Or how do we want to do
I already talked about Petra Kvitova a little bit here. She generally doesn't play this event. When she does, I don't think she's won a match in a long time here. Has a nice game, very good player, but just seems more interested in coming here, maybe collecting some free points with her bye and a check here, and going to Stuttgart and getting ready to win or do very well at that event. So I think she's definitely overvalued. She's in that quarter with Muguruza. Yes, she's in a nice part of the draw. Yes, she could win this if she seems to care, but I'm certainly not counting on that, especially at the price that she's being offered.
Yeah, and look, I completely agree here. I think, she will need to face probably the winner of Putintseva Muguruza to get out of the quarter. Then probably has to play Kenin in a semi, or Mertens or Jabeur. They're all pretty decent plays here, and I'm just not sure. I don't know. I'm not as high on Kvitova. I know she has some solid stints playing clay, and she has some decent clay results, but I just don't think the consistency's there. I think she's probably better on a slower hard court than she is on this type of surface. I don't think the movement is as great for her. So, yeah, look, we shall see. But I think she is certainly overvalued here.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Alrighty. I think that's the two women's tournaments wrapped up for this week. Shall we roll on to the men's?
Indeed, and I think we're starting in Cagliari, maybe Cagliari. I don't know. I'm not really great with Italian. Oh, no, never mind. You put Marbella up there. So we'll start there. We'll go to Spain, a name that I actually know how to pronounce. We're in Marbella. Again, another clay tournament here. It's so nice. I like clay tennis. Carreño Busta there at the top, Del Bonis at the bottom. We've had a handful of matches here. How do you see this half of the draw playing out?
I feel like the fact that Kwon, Berankis, and Gombos have made it through to the second round of this tournament doesn't give me a lot of hope around this tournament overall. And when you look at it, that you got, one of Ramos, Berankis, Gombos, or Del Bonis is going to be in the semi-final here. It's hard to make a case for anyone. I think, Holger Rune, that was a pretty poor loss to Kwon when Kwon really hasn't played, I don't think, more than like a handful of games on clay across his entire career. I don't know if anyone got sucked in by I think Flash Score was showing one of like the men's hardcourt challenger tournaments as clay, so it looked like Kwon was actually quite proficient. Anyway, they've been rewarded because he's somehow managed to win that in a tiebreak. I think there's a good opportunity there for, maybe one of the Argentinians at the top. Carreño Busta doesn't quite, he doesn't have that kind of Spanish feel to him that you probably get with some of the other Spaniards around their overall clay form. I think, looking at this and considering just before that North American hardcourt swing, Albert Ramos did make a final down in South America. I think it was, he's played some relatively decent tennis. He is at home in Spain. He gets Barrancas and then the winner of, Gombos Delbonis. I think, either of them could potentially give a little bit of grief, I think, to Carreño Busta here. Does anyone stand out to you?
I think what you said about Busta rings true. A lot of people assume that just because you're from Spain, that you've played a lot on clay, that you're probably very good. And as you start to look, his performance, especially the last couple of years, has really been poor on clay. I think the winner of what I assume will be an ARV versus Delbonis match has a really good chance to make the final here. So it's, like you said, it's very messy. It's hard to take anyone, frankly, for me in that first quarter. Mm-hmm. So I'm, for me, it's the winner of that, again, ARV Delbonis match. I think that's kind of who we see in the finals.
Definitely. And if we make our move down to the bottom half with some key names, I guess, bookending at the top and the bottom there, we've got Feliciano Lopez as the 6th seed. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. In that third quarter there was Casper Ruud. And then we've got ADF and Fabio Fognini in the bottom quarter there with, a couple of interesting names there, Pedro Martinez and Juan Munar, amongst others, and Gianluca Mager, who, won, I think, the Challenger tournament that was played here last week. So anything stand out to you in this half?
The question is always, does Fabio Fognini care? He's in Italy, generally plays very well here, but always hard to figure out what his level of interest is. Very winnable quarter for him if he does decide to come in here motivated. I like the spot for Casper Ruud, though. Again, I'm not counting on Fognini to be at his very best and playing great, but Ruud, again, he's got a bye here. He's taking some time, get some practice in. This is a great surface for him. Yes, he might have to play Mager there in the second round, who, again, had success here, but I think Ruud is probably the best clay player of the group that I'm seeing here of the list. Hasn't been spectacular this year, but I think maybe with the service change, he starts to get himself right.
Yeah, and I think, he probably was a little bit disappointing to start the year, but, he certainly does have, and I think he did have that side strain, I think when he played Rublev down at the Australian Open. So if he is back to that full fitness, he should be able to make a bit of a run here. Now, yes, I did kind of list off the seeds and a couple of unseeded players who do, appeal here. There is obviously another one there in Carlos Alcaraz, who, is one of the up-and-coming teenagers on tour. I think he's a little bit under the odds, I think, in this particular draw. And he's got a really tricky first-round match against someone who's, Milojevic is played pretty well at challenger level and has shown some pretty decent signs, I think, in patches since, even since the latter part of last year. Alcaraz, I think, Alcaraz is about $1.30 or minus 300, I think, in this particular matchup. Alcaraz is 10-1 to win the tournament, whereas Nicola is 250-1. Played a couple of solid qualifying rounds and has the power to kind of hit through Alcaraz. So, it's not a gimme first up for Alcaraz. And it might be a good opportunity, I think, for either the winner of that tournament, that match, and even Tara Daniel to kind of take that 6th seed spot from Feliciano Lopez if they can. And looking to the bottom, as you said, Fabio, if he turns up, he can probably, does he want to get to Monte Carlo next week early and, have a bit of a break, or does he want to invest himself here? I think Davidovich Fokina is probably the more, he's the more consistent choice. I think if you want to have a little bit more of a high probability of knowing what you're going to get, the ceiling probably just isn't as high as Fabio at his peak. So it is hard to kind of marry all that up, but it makes for an interesting half of the draw.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it could be a lot of fun. Again, I hope he's interested in playing well because, it just makes this whole tournament a lot more fun.
I tweeted the other day that I'm still confused about Juan Munar. And I think he's starting to fall into that Sabalenka Mertens patch of I need to not get sucked into him in outrights. I think he's going to beat people and grind people down. I just don't think he has enough weapons. If things don't start to go his way, he doesn't have a plan B. And I think we saw that in the final of the Challenger against Magia the other day, that, he was dominant at the start, but then all of a sudden, when the opponent starts finding the lines, or, just inside the line, he just didn't have an answer besides, try and keep continuing with his plan A. So look, it is going to be an interesting draw. Who's your top pick out of this one?
As I start to look at this and I have to pick a winner, I like Casper Ruud. I like the half that he's in. I like the quarter that he's in. I think he has a great chance to make it through there. Maybe he's still injured. I think he's had enough time to recover, and I think that he should be in good shape here to make a run if he is healthy. So happy to take a little bit of a risk on his health and pick him to win.
He's a quality player in a semi decent draw. It's hard to oppose him strongly in any way. Candice has gone for Carreño Busta. I've also gone for someone in the top half, but I've gone for Albert Ramos. As I said, I think that second quarter does shape up to be relatively attackable here. He showed some semi-decent form. He's also playing at home. It's not the worst spot for him, I think. When you look through, he should be able to beat I think it was Barancas in this second round, and to be able to kind of push on from there. I think he's he won't be a pushover this week. It's just a matter of whether he brings a level close to his best, but probably not someone I'm not going to be launching heavily into him, but I think he's a decent chance when you look at the draw there. Do you have a value pick? Do you have a value pick for here?
Quite a bit, because he is my value pick. I really like his odds given his draw. I think he's the best player in that quarter. Happy to oppose Busta there at the top of the draw. So see some value in his number. I think it was floating around in the 20s or so, somewhere in that range. See if I can find that quickly. But again, given where he is, I just think it's a really nice spot for him. Okay, so around 12-1, sorry. But this is just a great spot for him. That's a nice number at 12. It's, as we've talked about a couple times already, if you can find a way to oppose somebody like Carreño Busta, who is a favorite with a lot of question marks, or close to the favorite with a lot of question marks, that's what you got to do.
It's hard to see him in that top section not starting favorite in his next two, being anything above plus 150 in a semi-final, and then if he were to win through that, he's if you multiplied everything up, I don't think you're getting that 12-1. I don't think. I think that is where the value is here. Now, Candice has gone for the Challenger title winner from last week in Magia. I've gone. I said I went rogue before. This one I've gone a little bit more rogue. So I've gone for Nicola. He's 250-1.
I think even pronounce his last name.
Well, you don't need to be able to do it, really, at that price. If he wins the tournament, I will. Oh, I was nearly going to say something really bad. I'll have a think of what I would do if he were to win the tournament. But again, look, I think when you look at his draw, and if we're thinking, that Feliciano Lopez section is a little bit attackable, I just don't think his outrights, compared to the fact that he's played pretty well over the last couple of weeks on clay at Challenger level. He's played, Alcaraz hasn't played. If Alcaraz had played the last couple of weeks, I think at Challenger level, and played well and really kind of, taken some people apart, I'd be more inclined here. But he's now sitting in that weird kind of patch where he's playing a lot of ATP tournaments, but he's not really getting anywhere in a lot of them. And I just don't know if he perhaps has the confidence, I guess, in his game that he perhaps may have had when he goes on those tears, or he went on those tears last year. I think he's kind of stuck there. He's not having that continuity on clay that he's probably used to over the last couple of years. So, look, I just think there's a little spot there that if Lopez is vulnerable, why not take someone at 250-1 and try your luck and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, at that big of a number, that's a nice little lottery ticket. That's a good opportunity to buy in early on somebody.
Now, who's your unforced error for this tournament?
Unforced error, again, as we look through, trying to look for people with maybe some distractions. And Mr. Lopez has a tournament that starts in a month that he's in charge of. He has to schedule Madrid. He's doing all the stuff that somebody does that is to run a tennis tournament. I can't imagine that he's fully focused on all this stuff that's going on here. So happy to give him maybe a little bit of a pass this week.
And my unforced error coming off last week, I spoke about him a little bit before, is Wamuna. I think, he's obviously, yes, played a lot of tennis, but again, I think he just kind of lacks the weapons to be able to take control of matches, and I'm just a bit uncertain on him, so I'm just going to leave him to the side and not really oppose him in any way, but just kind of watch and see if I can figure him out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a nice personal unforced error.
And looking to the overvalued players, Candace has gone with Fabio Fognini. I don't think we really need an explanation for that one. I think we can kind of read between the lines on that one. Who's your overvalued player?
As I start to look again at players I'm looking to avoid, we tee this up a little bit. Pablo Carreño Busta, again, I think he gets more credit for his ranking than he deserves, gets more credit for maybe his performance in 2019, 2018 on clay versus what he's done in the last year and a half or so on the surface. So very happy to avoid him, and I think it's very silly some of the prices I'm seeing on him in the outright markets.
And my overvalued player, I did touch on it a bit, is Carlos Alcaraz. I'm not saying that he can't win the tournament. I just don't think when you look at his odds and you compare them to some of the other players in the tournament and the draws that they have, I just think he's a little bit short.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's played some nice tennis so far, and but I don't. It's hard for me to put together a situation where he wins this event, and he's getting just a lot of respect.
I think that's the thing. And like I said, if he'd been winning leading up to this, I'd be more inclined to jump in.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I think that wraps up that tournament. 3 down, 1 to go. Shall we move on over?
Finally, Cagliari. This is what I thought we were starting with. I think this is what you told me we were starting with. I'm going to
yeah,
put it on anyway.
My fault.
Dan Evans is the 1 seed. That's very interesting. Struff down there at the bottom is our 5. Bess Slavili as our 4. A couple other interesting names there. One of your fellow Australians there in the 6th hole. How do you see this top half of the draw shaking out?
Well, I hope for John Millman's sake he can win a match. Look, it's a funny one. When the draw first came out, you look and you go, oh, gee, Basilashvili's got a pretty decent draw there with a bye and then 4 qualifiers in his section. Struff maybe a little bit of, maybe able to challenge him a little bit there, but I'm not really sold on that second quarter there. You look to the top, I think the big name that everyone kind of gravitates towards is Lorenzo Mazzetti, based on his form over, in those couple of tournaments, I think leading up to the French Open last year, and then also just generally his overall clay form and slower hard court form, it has looked pretty solid. So he's got Dennis Novak there first up with a chance to play Evans. I'm not going to completely count Evans out. I think I've opposed him a couple of times in the past on clay and been made to look a little bit silly. I think his slice and his just general play doesn't actually work too badly on the clay. It's not the worst, but obviously it's going to be tough there with Mazzetti most likely, or maybe Novak first up. There's no one that I'm really strongly, I think, looking at here when you look at the overall quarter. I think Ger, he did have a solid win there. My big query with a couple of these players is that they're in Monte Carlo Masters 1000 qualifying at the end of this week, I think it is. So that's a mild question mark there, but there's not a lot that's really standing out to me from a significant value, besides maybe, I'd maybe go Basilashvili in an outright and just avoid him in head-to-head matches, because I think he's shown he's either not interested or he's going to win the tournament looking at his recent form. But how about you? Is there anyone that stands out?
Yeah, as much as, I am a little worried about Gier maybe looking forward to Monte Carlo, he is close to getting into that main draw. If a couple other players fall out, I think he said it was 4 when we were talking before the show here. I just like this spot in his draw. I think he has 2 very winnable matches, and at that point is going to look at either Dan Evans, maybe Mazzetti there, and just go, what the heck? I might as well keep going. I mean, the second quarter is very, very soft in my opinion. Struff, Basilashvili, a lot of question marks around them. For Struff, more the surface, or Basilashvili, more his recent form. No names there in the middle really stick out to me or kind of scare me. So I think this is kind of a nice spot for Gier. Massetti is the favorite. Maybe he just continues to be hot in his home country and just kind of blast through this half of the draw. But I think given how soft the second quarter is, I kind of like Gier's draw, given that he's kind of going to get an opportunity to play either Evans or Massetti and then kind of walk into the final, in my opinion.
And look, a little shout out to Sumit Nagal for making his way through qualifying and allowing an opportunity for more jokes this week. Particularly now that we're back on clay, and I obviously didn't learn my lesson from last year when I got abused for making a joke. So we'll see what happens this year and whether we go down that path again. If we move to the second half, and we've already had the 8th seed knocked out of the tournament, Tommy Paul losing to Yannick Hanfmann in 3 sets. I think he was up a break in that 3rd set as well. Looking through a couple of Italians there with Cecchinato, Fabiano, and Travaglia and Sonego.
Cecchinato. It's Cecchinato.
Sorry.
The greatest find in the history of the world. You can't remember that.
And they're sandwiching Gilles Simon, who I think was pretty vocal a couple of weeks ago that, he was struggling for motivation on tour. So it's good to see him kind of back here and playing in some capacity. You look to the bottom, Guido Pella, I watched that match, and Guido's had a rough run. If anyone's been impacted more by kind of COVID or being a close contact or anyone, I think Guido's probably copped it close to the worst, I think, out of a lot of the players personally. I think he had 6 different service games. So he had 8 service games for the match. 6 of them, I think he led 30 love, and he got broken 4 times, I think, and it all just kind of snowballed for him for there. Bednay, got the win there after a pretty poor first set. And you look to the bottom, Taylor Fritz gets a bye, and look, he hasn't been the worst on clay over the last couple of years. His game seems to translate a little bit better than some of the other Americans. Who stands out here for you?
The name you screwed up, Mr. Cecchinato. I think this is a great spot for him. Tommy Paul got knocked out. That takes care of a seed. I kind of raised an eyebrow at the idea that Lorenzo Sonego somehow gets a bye in this draw as the 3rd seed. I think that Cecchinato can more than comfortably beat his countrymen here along the way. And you're right, maybe Fritz, his game translates here a little bit, but I think this is a great half of the draw for someone who really likes the clay, like Cecchinato.
Yeah, and look, looking at this section as well, we're in a similar spot. I don't mind Hanfmann. I think when you look at that quarter, as you said, it is attackable now around Sonego, and Yannick was able to take Tommy Paul out in that first round. But look, I don't mind when you look at Yerasimov, Bednay, and then one of Vesely and Martin. I think it's a good opportunity for Taylor Fritz to kind of really take control of that top American ranked.
It's a great
player.
quarter for him. Yeah,
I think so.
He's got a couple warm-up matches, frankly, here. It sets up nicely for him.
And I think it sets up pretty nicely, I think, for a potential semifinal as well. So I don't think it's the worst play here. I've seen worse draws. I've seen a lot worse draws.
Yeah, absolutely.
All righty. Shall we get to our picks?
Absolutely.
I'm just going to lead off because mine is Taylor Fritz. I think that draw is a little bit too good to be true. It's just a matter of whether he actually makes the most of it. I think it's a good spot for him. As I said, his game translates relatively well. He's had some pretty decent success at times on clay and made a couple of clay quarters look silly over the years. I'm happy to jump in and back him to win a clay court tournament, I suppose.
It's a funky week. It's a brand new event. Anything is possible.
Speaking of going rogue, Candice isn't here, but she has picked John Millman. We might have to ask her about that. We'll ask her about that next week because
all right,
John needs to lift. Let me put it that way. Who have you gone for?
I have taken Mr. Gier, as I talked about. I like his spot in the draw. Yes, he might be looking forward to possibly qualifying for Monte Carlo, but again, I think he's going to stumble in a situation where he goes, you know what, let me just grab some points here, and maybe I miss qualifying and take the chance that I don't get into the main draw, but we'll see how it goes. I think he's in a nice spot, and I'm very happy to take him here to win.
And who have you gone for as your value pick?
Again, I teed it up again in the bottom half, the most attackable part of the draw. Mr. Cecchinato, it's a very nice price. He was in kind of the teens there to win this event in his home country on a surface that he likes quite a bit. I think there's just a bunch of value in that number. Again, given the situation, the surface, and his spot in the draw, happy to take him.
And I've gone for, following a similar train of thought, I've gone for Yannick Hanfmann. I think, it is an attackable spot there with Sonego, the only seed left. And it's, I think his game translates pretty well. He plays enough on clay at both, ATP level and below. I think it's a decent spot here for him. Now, unforced error-wise, I've gone for John Millman, which is why I want to ask Candice next week why she went for him to win. I haven't seen enough. He's a type of player, he needs to play a lot of tennis. He needs to find a rhythm, and he needs to get into that rhythm on court. I just haven't seen him. I think Corrie is a really tricky start for him when he's low on confidence. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to see him win the tournament. I'm a big fan of Millman. I just haven't seen enough from him, I think, to start the year, particularly since they've left. Particularly, actually, he was pretty poor as well in Melbourne. So it hasn't been the best year for him. Who have you gone for as your unforced error?
Mr. Bedney down there at the bottom, again, an older player. He is in pretty squarely needing to qualify to get into Monte Carlo. I think that he's got a win here, might beat Gerasima, but then is looking at Fritz, Cecchinato, maybe Hoffman there, and that's, a long week for him. I think he is actually probably looking forward to next week, so happy to give him a pass.
And I think he's got Jake on Twitter as well, who's just messaged in saying it's worth mentioning that Bedney was struggling with an abdominal injury for that entire match against Zepier in the first round as well. So that does tie in quite well. Now, overvalued players, Candice has gone for the top seed Dan Evans. I have gone for Lorenzo Mazzetti because I just can't get my head around him being the favorite of an ATP level tournament just yet. I just don't think the consistency is there yet with him. I'd love, again, a bit like Millman, love to see him win it. I just don't see any value in his price. Doesn't mean he's not going to win it. It's just, I think he's just slightly overvalued at the moment. And I do talk about this a little bit, when you look at a lot of these players, the younger players, when you look at what they can produce at their best, great, very, very talented. The consistency part just hasn't come there, and I don't think that's built enough into the price here. I think with him, even though he's playing at home. Who have you gone for as your overvalued player?
A different Italian, but to add to what you said, said even simply, when's the last time a 19-year-old was the favorite for an ATP tournament?
It's been a while. I'd have to go, did Sinner end up as a favorite in one of those kind of 250s somewhere?
It's possible, but it doesn't happen rarely, and happy to avoid them. Lorenzo Sonego here kind of teed that up. Really surprised to see him as the second favorite here. Again, his performances on clay haven't been terribly good. Just really kind of mind-boggling to me. So happy to avoid him again as the second favorite for some reason.
More than fair. We're just opposing all of the Italians. Alrighty, I think that just about wraps
Italian.
In some, yeah.
Just one.
There's enough of them. Surely there had to be one.
Indeed.
Alrighty, I think we've rolled through all four.
Yeah, I think that's about all the tennis we have to cover here. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for listening. Of course, you can get this on a podcast right away, just about everywhere. And we'll be back soon to talk some more tennis.
Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in either live and chatting along or listening to this back via the podcast. And we will be back soon.